Today, here on the second day of the Kaji Manlam, we are continuing our teaching on the noble aspiration for excellent conduct. So I will continue with this today. His Holiness is talking about the volume, whether people can hear. Now, in the aspirations from the Light of Gold Sutra that we recite in the morning, as it says in the Confession from the Light of Gold Sutra, all of us people, whoever you are, if we have any sort of mutual set sort of malice or wish to harm each other, we often have this sort of a wish to harm each other. And particularly, we often intentionally disregard the feelings of pleasure or pain of animals and give them incredible oppression and suffering. And because of this reason, so for that reason, we come here in this sacred place, and it is a very great fortune. And at such a time as this, we need to transform our intention into something that's different than normal, different than usual. We need to accustom ourselves to that. We need to transform our attitude. Our normal attitude is one that leads us to make mistakes and problems. And that brings us unhappiness. And so we need to think about things carefully and change our attitude. We need to think about how we can change our attitude and change our own conduct. It is very important to think about this. So now I'm going to continue from where I was talking yesterday. So continuing with the noble aspiration for excellent conduct. We're talking about offerings and confessions. So according to the sutra, there are the 10 great aspirations of Samantabhadra. And so of these 10, the first is prostration, the second is praises. We talked about those yesterday. Today we have making offerings and confessing our misdeeds. This is the part that we have come to. It is on page 112 of the Milnam book. Have you all had your tea? You finished your tea, right? Otherwise, I'd give a great break here. So first here, the offerings. When we talk about offerings, there are offerings that are connected with sutras and offerings that are connected with the mantras. And so there are these two types. But here we are talking about offerings connected with the sutras. And so because of this, these are sutras, offerings that are discussed in these sutras that we're primarily making here. Now here there are offerings that can be surpassed and offerings that are unsurpassable. Now the reason that there is a distinction between those that are surpassable and those that are unsurpassable comes down to whether you can make an offering that is bigger, greater, vaster than that offering. If there's an offering that you can, make an offering that could be surpassed or exceeded or greater, then that is surpassable. And if there's nothing greater, nothing better, then that is an unsurpassable offering. And so, in the Noble Aspiration for Excellent Conduct, it first talks about, I make an offering to these victors of the best of flowers and the finest garlands, and so forth. You can all read this. So I make an offering to these victors of the best of flowers and the finest garlands, symbols and ointments, the best parasols, the best of lamps, and incense the most fine. I make an offering to these victors of the finest robes, the finest fragrances, and powders in heaps equal to Mount Meru, arranged in the most sublimes of displays. So these are the two stanzas, which talk about the surpassable offerings. So a few days ago, when we were talking about Atisha's lamp for the path of enlightenment, and what it says there, it says to make offerings that are like those in the discussed in the Noble Aspiration for Excellent Conduct. And so here, so we need to make offerings of everything that we have. It's not a question of making of just a small offering. If we have something, we need to make offerings with everything that we have. Otherwise, as it says in the lamp, in the torch of certainty by Jamgon Kongtrul Rinpoche, we might think of ourselves as being someone who has nothing to give, nothing at all. I can't give anything. But out of their great compassion, we say to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, out of your compassion, please accept this small thing. It's not a question of not having anything to offer. There's something to offer. But, if you have something to offering and you don't keep the best for yourself and don't give the small things, and then you do that, then that is not good. And if you have some fruit, some leftover fruit that you haven't eaten, you make an offering, that's one sort of offering. But that is not how we should offer. We should offer whatever we have, anything that comes in. We're not talking about making a small offering. And so in terms of the 7 types of offerings, they're the best of flowers, the finest garlands, symbols, ointments, parasols, lamps, incense, robes. So flowers, garlands, symbols, ointments, parasols, lamps, incense, and robes. These are discussed, right? Also here the ointments are considered as part of the lamp, of the parasols. And so here in this way there are 7 offerings that are made. Now there are different ways to count these 7 offerings. Some people say that the 7 branches are the 7 types of offerings. But the great teacher Trungpa said that the finest flowers and so forth are the 7 said that Atisha said that these 7 offerings of the best of flowers and finest garlands and so forth are the 7 offerings that were discussed by Atisha. But in any case, when we say the best of flowers, we talk about the we're not talking about the flowers from they're talking about the flowers from divine realms and human realms. Now, these may not be flowers that we actually have, but by the strength of our intention, we can make them, and we can imagine that we emanate these or imagine these, and so we can visualize these in different ways. We can visualize that they even get sent out across the internet and so forth. And we think that any flower that we often has all 5 of the sensory pleasures. It has the flower, and when you shake it, its petals make a nice, pleasing sound. And then there are jasmine, or there are saffron flowers and so forth that have an excellent smell. And then also flowers that are edible. And so if we think about these, then with lovely sweet taste, and so these have a good flavor. And when all these flowers touch the body, they're able to bring us pleasure, and so they have this aspect of touch, as tangible aspect as well. And so in this way, all these flowers that we offer are able to produce the 5 sensory pleasures. And when we talk about the finest garlands, this is like these. It's like the garlands of flowers that are offered here in India, of different shapes, flowers of lotuses, and so forth that we are offering in garlands. We talk about symbols here. It also includes other sorts of instruments. So music, we probably should say. Perhaps this is what it means. It's not just the normal cymbals that we play, but it also includes lutes and other instruments. So this is how we should think of it. So included within the word symbols, it also means all of the other musical instruments and lutes and so forth and guitars that can make beautiful sounds, as well as clay drums and other drums that we beat, as well as bells that we shake and so forth, and so just all these different musical instruments that we can think of, and we imagine offering them, and that is a good way to offer. When we talk about the ointments here, these are like the nice smelling things, nice smelling ointments that we can rub on ourselves. And so they are made into ointments that we can spread on our body out of delicious fragrances and so forth. And for example, there are also some ointments that have medicinal herbs that if you rub them on your chest, then it brings coolness to your body. And so this is a particular type of offering made here in India. Now the best of lamps, these are the natural types of light, the light of the sun, the moon, and the stars, as well as those lamps that are made by people. Those that are made that are lit by various types of electricity or oil and so forth. We imagine offer these as well. And similarly with the incense, there's the various natural or various manufactured incense, and so these are things that we can burn as incense. So the various types of incense. And when we talk about the finest robes, things that are soft and comfortable to wear, that have the so robes that have the features of these, and that can keep us so that we are neither too hot nor too cold. And when we talk about the best parasols here, these are the parasols, like the parasol that is held above the body. And so this is like, it has a staff made out of the vedurio, or blue beryl. It's sort of a miraculous sort of thing, but here. And so that it's decorated with gold and various different types of jewels. And so it is able to... They have these... When Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are born in the pure realms, then they have the ability to emanate these beautiful jeweled parasols that have jewels and little bells that ring with sound, that are able to sound the words of the Buddha speaking about karma and effect, karma and result. And so the size of these parasols is as large as the billion worlds of our world realm. It's able to cover the entire world. And so these type of parasols, as well as many other types of parasols, it's all different sorts and types, as I spoke about before. As I spoke about yesterday, we had a big parasol above the top of the stage yesterday. Yesterday we were talking, and here in the Gandavyuha Sutra, there was much a discussion of parasols that cover the entire billion-fold world realm. So when we made the one on the stage, we tried to do that one. When we first made it really big, and we were unable to bring it up, and so we thought of it. We had to make it a little bit smaller. But that was the sort of parasol that we made. And lamps are, as I discussed before, lamps that have oils with pleasant, delicious scents, as well as the sun and the moon and so forth. And then jewels such as rubies and so forth that give off light without distinction during the night and day. And with the incense, long sticks of incense, incense pills or incense powders and so forth. And so the various robes include those that are light and soft and various different types of robes. When we say the finest fragrances, this is like the best of the it's fragrant water that is scented, that is. These are all the liquids that have perfumes and fragrances that have water. And when we talk about powders and heaps equal to Mount Meru, these are fragrant powders. So when we talk about the finest fragrances, this is liquid, and when we talk about powders, these are in powdered form. When we talk about arranging the most sublime displays. So this is the arrangements of flowers that are the most sublime, the arrangements of incense, arrangements of music and ointments and everything that are all arranged in the most sublime, in various different ways. And so we think that these are all present there. In brief, the reason that we talk about all these different things that we're making offerings, we're talking about various different things, right? But when you say making offerings, this is the Sanskrit word is puja. So puja means to please. The meaning of the word puja is to please. So if we talk about it in terms of the poetic qualities, it fills the heart with pleasure. So in terms of filling the heart with pleasure, it is called a puja. So we usually think when we make the offering of these wonderful things to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, they develop this undefiled pleasure, not defiled pleasure. Defiled pleasure is the pleasure of our world that has the suffering of change and this pervasive suffering of formation. But this is not that. They experience the undefiled pleasure through receiving the offerings. And so they talk about the feeling that this brings, the feeling that is. So whatever it feels, and through how it. So we need to think about the feelings that these offerings bring. When we talk about offerings, if we take it as a broader thing, we generally talk about offerings as those things that we are, as just being the things that we are offering. There's nothing wrong with talking about them in this way. But actually, when we talk about offerings, it's because of the things that we offer and making the offering of them, it is the special pleasure and the special pleasure and happiness that is produced in the mind. That is what we mean by the offering. So we give the name of the result actually to the cause, and then we call that the offering. So in terms of the ability to cause pleasure, we give the name of the result, the puja, the pleasure of the result, to the Rodhan. Now, of course, in Tibetan or in English, that's not how we describe it. But when we talk about it in terms of the meaning of the Indian or the Sanskrit word, then this is the meaning of the Indian word. And so for this reason, some scholars say, if we make an offering, then it has to be an offering of thusman, because it always brings the undefiled pleasure, and so that is the feature of an offering. And so, generally, when we make offerings, we do this as an antidote for stinginess. If anything that we do as a Dharma practice does not go as a remedy for an affliction, then it does not become a Dharma. So when we make an offering, it has to be an antidote for an affliction. So when we make offerings, it is primarily an antidote for our stinginess. And stinginess is that when we have things for ourselves, but we are not able to give them away. So when you have that sort of a narrow sort of mind, that is the stinginess. So an offering is when we have, if we have something we could give, but we do not give it, then that is an impure sort of action. So we don't offer the things that we have, and instead, we give something old or impure or not so good, and we print. That is not a pure offering. So as the great masters of the path, like when the cake gets moldy, then you give that up, and then you give the students all the. And so generally, you should offer the best of the things. You should offer the best and freshest. And this is to train our minds. Because, as I said before, the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas don't really need any cake. They've probably had too much of it. We have to think about what is it that pleases the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. So we need to think about what is pleasing to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in their mind. But there's no difference to the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas in their own mind. But the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, their main purpose, if we say it in common terms, if the main aim of the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas is to free all sentient beings from suffering. To free all sentient beings from suffering comes from relying on the causes and the conditions, and so the causes and conditions are to gather the merit and to eliminate the negative. And so for that reason, So there's no substitute. No someone else cannot be a substitute and gain merit on your behalf. You have to do it yourself. And so the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas are like an example for us. They're someone we can think about, but actually the person who really has to gather the accumulations and purify the negativities is ourselves and ourselves. And so if we are able to gather the accumulations and purify our misdeeds, then that someone who can do that will be able to attain Buddhahood. Otherwise we will not be able to. And so the early Kadampa masters said that when we make the offering, we need to make offerings. We need to offer things that are offered and things that are not. Mountains and rivers and so forth and all that. Nowadays, most everything is owned. You know, everything's owned. We've divided things up to countries, and everything has everything has an owner. They even say that now on the moon they're dividing it up into sections that are owned by various different countries and so forth. But whether we talk about the things that are owned or unowned, when we talk about the things that we offer, they're all that we can offer. It doesn't really come down to what is offered. Actually, it comes down to our minds. Even if you have the best of things to offer, it doesn't necessarily become a good offering, because you have to have faith. You have to make an offering with faith and devotion. It's not just the offerings. So, for example, when I made an announcement, or I gave a talk about environment, I suggested that all of our monasteries can make an area for the preservation of the natural environment, a place that can be planted with the various plants, trees, flowers, and so forth. You know, if you have a nice, suitable area where you could do this, then this would make you think of this as an area to make an offering to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Then that itself becomes a Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. There's no need to make some sort of another site of separate offering. If you take the natural environment itself as something to be, it's a beautiful, wonderful offering to make, right? When Atisha came to Tibet, the water in Tibet was incredibly clean. And he said, "Oh, this is the best, the most pure of offerings." Because when you offer water, you don't have a lot of stinginess about it. So you can give a real pure offering of this water, Atisha said. So really, it's important that we make offerings through faith. Then there are the unsurpassable offerings. This is I also imagine offering to all victors that which is vast and unsurpassable. I offer and bow to the victors with the power of faith and excellent conduct. So an unsurpassable offering is the offerings that the great beings, that beings who are on the highest bodhisattva level, such as Manjushri and Sambantabhadra, can emanate and make. And so first they emanate incredible numbers, an infinite number of bodies, and then each of these infinite numbers of bodies then emanates from each pore of its body. It emanates another innumerable bed of bodies, each of which makes an offering to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. It's as we were saying before, that even on the tip of a hair, there are all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in the entire world. So these are like this incredible array of beings. And so we think that these beings are not making these offerings for just a single instant, but they're doing it continually this is something that we can't describe, but within the Dharma expanse, the Dharma Dhatu, they are able to make this because of the force of their aspirations and their samadhi. They are able to make these offerings. Now, we aren't able to do this. How can we make these offerings now? But whatever offering we make, we can imagine that they're being offered to all the Buddhas of the 10 directions. We make these aspirations of excellent conduct with that great faith and devotion, then it will have vast benefits for us. So like when we make an offering of offering water, it may be a small bowl of water, but if we think of it as the bowl that we're offering as being this huge bowl, this undefiled bowl of precious substance that we are filling with the offering, then it becomes a vast offering. And we think that it is something that all the Buddhas and all their children, the Bodhisattvas, are able to enjoy for incredible number of eons. And we think that then that they're all that from that we emanate many offerings that we flow to offer these to all these beings. This is something that is difficult. This is difficult to get our minds around. We aren't able to get our minds around it. We can't actually do what Manjushri and Samanthabhadra do, but we can pretend, we can imagine that we are doing that. So, make the aspiration that may my offering become just like that those offerings that Manjushri is making, and that's how we need to make the offering. If I say too much, then there's not a whole lot of time for me to say that. So that continues. Now there is a story about these offerings. And in the story about making offerings, in the ancient times when the Buddha was present, there was a householder whose name was Deva. And when he died, he had no children. When he passed away, he had no children. And so at that time, if you had no children, then all of the household's wealth would be taken into the king's palace. And so this is brought into the king Bimbisara's palace. So all his wealth was taken into King Bimbisara's palace. So Bimbisara, after he got the householder Deva's wealth, the Buddha was at that time staying at the monastery in Rajgir, and so King Bimbisara went to him to. Now he said, now he had 80,000 bars of gold, but he had the most. He didn't have that great clothes, or he didn't have that great food, and he didn't have very nice things at all. His cart and was bad. His horse was really thin and skinny. He was so rich, but in his own life he led this very poor lifestyle. So why is this? And the Buddha said, stingy people may have wealth, but they're unable to share it with other people. But wise people, the intelligent people, when they have wealth, then they make great offerings with it. They make vast offerings. They're very generous with their wealth. But this householder Deva was extremely stingy. And so because of being so stingy, his roots of virtue were severed and he fell into the lower realms, said the Buddha. So if we give an example, it's like this. So for example, like squirrels know how to collect nuts and collect seeds, but they do not know how to plant the seeds. It's the same with that. They know how to enjoy the merit, but they do not know how to continue it and how to make it continue. And the reason that this happens, because so the Buddha said, the Buddha was able to see what had happened in past eons, right? During the time of the Buddha Kashyapa in Rajgir, there was an Arhat Pratyeka Buddha, and the previous birth of householder Deva had a house, and so this Pratyeka Buddha came to his house, and he felt great faith and got ready to offer to this. But afterwards, he thought to himself, he made an offering. May I never fall into the lower realms and become wealthy and that. But in the time in between, he regretted that. And he regretted the virtue that he did. He thought, oh, that wasn't okay what I did. Giving that was not a good thing to do. It didn't work out well, and so he regretted the virtue that he had done. It probably would have been better for me to just give it to my servants. And so because of that, he had accumulated the roots of virtue, but because he regretted that, because of the power of making the offerings to the Pratyeka Buddha Arhat in the past, he became very rich, but because he regretted it, he was unable to enjoy the results of that offering. He was not able to enjoy the results of his generosity or be generous himself. And so in this way, even though he had 80,000 bars of gold, he lived a very poor life, or very impoverished life. If you are intelligent or wise, you may not have more than a small amount to give. You can gather a lot of virtue. You can make a large offering, and you can really develop and increase your virtue. And so when King Bimbisara heard these, he thought to himself, "Oh, from now on, I will give all my offerings to all the spiritual seekers, but I won't give them to non-Buddhists," he said. And Bimbisara said, and the Buddha said, then you should not think in that way. All sentient beings need the food and clothes to live on. So you should not divide between Buddhists and non-Buddhists, but give to everyone. If you make a great offering and never lose that spirit of generosity, then you will never be impoverished. You will be able to meet meet great beings and be able to be freed from suffering. So there's no difference in you should not make a distance between who you're giving to, whether they're Buddhist or non-Buddhist. And it is also important that you not regret the virtue that you may give. So when you make an offering, when we say offering, what do we mean by that? Usually we think to ourselves, if we have some sort of nice thing, beautiful thing that sort of, that we like, then we think, oh, I'm not going to give this, I'm going to keep it for myself. And then if we have something that's not so good, oh, I can give it away, and we have no regret about giving it away. So that sort of thought has a lot of stinginess. It's mixed with stinginess. So whatever's beautiful, lovely, and wonderful, even if we cannot actually give those beautiful things, then we should think about give them to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas and other sentient beings. And this is very important as an antidote for stinginess, particularly now in this world. There are many impoverished people who have difficulty getting food and clothes. There are many who are unable to have access to medicine or doctors. And we should do whatever it is we can to help them in any way and be generous in any way we can. Even if we are not able to be generous, actually, we need to train our mind. And if we train our minds, then gradually it will get better. And then at some point, we will be able to give the great inexhaustible gifts to all sentient beings. And so thinking about it in this way is extremely important. I thought about something. There's something I already thought about before. Maybe if I tell you the story before, it would be good. It's a documentary. Is that what we call them these days, right? It's a documentary. It's like a film that shows, the actual way things are that you like see on TV or something, right? And so documentary showed a child. And so this child had an illness with his white blood cells, and so he had to have his blood exchanged every month, and it was a very difficult situation, and very expensive. And because it was so expensive, so he went to this school, and so all of his schoolmates, they would have all his schoolmates would make like little stuffed bears and stuffed animals and so forth, and all of these, and then they would take these to the stores and sell them, and then they get a little bit of money, And when they get a little bit of money, then they'd give it to that child's mother. So for his, in this way, they all supported his ability to receive medical treatment. This is a little tiny thing. If I were to make, if I were to make a gift of $10,000, I might be able to make that gift. But if I were to give it, it wouldn't be such a big thing. But for these people to do it, they each give $1, and it's like an amazing gift. And so we think, when we make a big offering, we think, a big offering. What's most important is actually. So, even if you're a rich person who makes a big offering, if you don't do it with a pure attitude, then it doesn't become a pure offering. But so even if you don't have much to give, if you do it with a pure attitude, whether you're making an offering up to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas or a gift down to those who need your help, then it is a wonderful gift. So the main reason that we are being generous is in order to train our mind, to become more generous, to be able to develop more courage, to be able to help those who are without protector and help. Then we come to confession. Now there's a lot to say about confession, maybe too much to say about it. I don't know if this happened. Actually, confession is something that is supposed to talk about, but I don't think I have time. So I'll talk about confession tomorrow. If I talk about it in brief today, then I'll talk about it detailed explanation tomorrow. Here it says, under the influence of desire, hatred, and ignorance, I have committed wrongs. Using my body, speech, and also mind, I confess each and every one of them. And so here, just in brief, whatever misdeed or wrong we have done, if we think to ourselves, it's very wonderful to think, I need to purify this and do this. But actually, what's most important is to confess and purify anything we have done anything that transgresses any transgression of the three realms. And the reason for this, we talk about the three realms, three vows, then this is Dharma language. But if we talk about it in an ordinary language, it's like a commitment we've made in the past. And we've had these commitments we've made in the past. And if we do something that breaks that commitment, that goes against that commitment, then it really brings us a lot of discomfort and discouragement and unhappiness in this life. It just feels like it's not right. So generally, all those small little, negative things that we do don't have a lot of effect in our life. But when you've made a great commitment and taken up something with your mind, but you're unable to do that, and if you have to give up on it, then because of that, in that life, it has a very strong impact or effect in your life, right? And so for this reason, so all those things that we have made commitments to before, or that we have vows to do, then those, if we confess all our transgression, then that impact or that effect that they had is stronger, and so it's a stronger stronger effect to confess them as well. Now, following this, we need to do some meditation. And for doing the meditation, yesterday we talked about all these situations of suffering. Now today, what should we meditate on? In general, all sentient beings who are as limitless as space, and in particular those sentient beings who live on this planet, live in dependence upon each other. Our food and clothing all depends upon one another. It comes about in dependence upon one each other. We may have good warm clothes, but the place they originally come from, there's much of this comes from animals. So without animals, we would not have the material itself. But it's not just that the animals if the animals are not there, but that also it's because they need to be manufactured in a factory. And so without the workers in the factories, we wouldn't be able to live them. If we think about it in this way, if we think about even the clothes we wear on our body go through thousands of steps and thousands of hands before they come to our body, and so everything we have comes through thousands or tens of thousands of steps to get to us. And so if we think about it in this way, from one perspective, all the sentient beings who are included within all those steps are extremely kind to us. In another perspective, all those things that come for us through all these steps, it's extremely amazing, actually. If it's nothing wrong to say it's a great fortune. Maybe this life, maybe our life is actually, in one way to think about it, it's easy, if you can think about it. Human life is easy if you think about it. It's not necessary to do a lot of things all the difficult, hard things that bring us victory and defeat others. Actually, we just need happiness. But we do all sorts of unvirtuous things with various different annoying things, and they have very difficulties in our problem. And so as a result of this, instead of receiving the happiness that we need, we bring ourselves the unnecessary suffering and pain. And so if we think about this, I've said this before, but if I say it again, it's not a problem. I was going on circumambulating the Juto monastery. And I was walking around there. I hadn't gone out for a few days, and so I was going out and walking. Each step I took, if you think about it, happiness is something that we think that happiness is something that we have to make up, something that we need to get for new. It's something that's there. We have that sort of belief usually, right? That we have to make our happiness. Oh, if I get a new car, then I'll be happy. If I get a new house, I'll be happy. Oh, if I get some new clothes, I'll be happy. But if you get a new car, it's doubtful. It's not necessarily that if you get a new friend, that not necessarily you'll get happiness. It's not necessary that if you get a house, you'll necessarily be happiness. But actually, our happiness. So we think about happiness as actually being something that's in our future, that's far away from us. But actually, happiness is something that's in this moment. It's something that we can feel in this moment. There's this happiness we can feel in this moment. And what I thought about myself at that time is, I didn't think about anything else. I just started thinking about the air that I'm breathing. I was just thinking about the air. So from minute to minute, from hour to hour, to day, to lifetime, through a whole life, we we breathe this air. And if we lose that air, if that air were to stop, then we would not be able. But we continue to breathe all through our life. And the air that we breathe, the oxygen that we breathe, where does it come from? It comes from the natural environment. It comes because of other things, because of the trees and plants and so forth. It comes from other things. And so the movement of our breath, it first comes from the moment that it comes to the time that it comes to our body. It goes through many steps. It goes through tens of thousands of steps. So because of tens of thousands of causes and conditions, only then are we able to actually breathe the air. And this is not just one time or 1 minute. It's something that we have to breathe our whole lifetime, from the time we're born to the end of the life. And it's like, because there's this whole long line of causes and conditions, that it's incredibly fortunate and incredibly amazing that we are able to even breathe. If we just breathe and relax, it's beautiful, isn't it? It's nice. It's lovely. It's not like we have to put together things and get together all these factors and produce something. It's not like that. It's naturally. It's automatic, you can say. It's natural. It's not something that someone particularly made it. There's nothing about it that's been made up. And so because of this, it's nothing that you have to make up. And this is, you call it great fortune or an incredible miracle. And so because of that, and for that reason, the main thing is that our livelihood is because of independence upon one another. And it's because of the kindness of others. And so if we think about this, if we remember the kindness of all sentient beings and meditate upon this for 3 minutes, so we'll meditate for 3 minutes.